Today I want to talk to you about a new feature in Quilt Path version 5, and that is multi-placement. What multi-placement does is it lets you place multiple things at one time and then sew them all out. So when you first go into select and sew, you're going to see a screen that looks something like this. Your placement method may be different if you have not been in this part of the program yet. It'll probably be sitting on block placement. That's usually the default when you first go into the program. But you do have a bunch of different choices you can choose. If you tap on all, it will bring up all of your placement methods that you can choose. These are to help you set blocks that are different shapes and to do different techniques inside the program. The one that I'm going to show you today is 2 points. So we're going to go to 2 points. I use 2-point placement settings a lot when I am placing things. This design that is currently up on my screen is for a Dream Big leaf panel, right? It's a group of designs that were packaged together for Dream Big leaf by Hoffman. It's something that I'm going to be using in a video that I'm going to show you soon. What I want to show you is different ways that you can place things with this new version of Quilt Path. The first one is that I can place it a lot like I did with version 4. So if I am simulating right now, I am not on a long arm. So if I tap on my screen where I want to set a point, I'm just going to come to this gray dot that represents my start point, because I'm using a 2-point start point right now. So my gray dot represents my start point, and I'm going to tap on my start point, and it's going to align my start point with where I have either tapped on my screen, or if I'm using my long arm, where my long arm is at that moment. Okay. And then the second gray dot on this one is the end point. So when you're doing a 2-point set, you're using the start point and the end point, and you are using just those 2 points to set your design. So if I was using 2-point start point, I would need to have this design sized to the size I would like it. And then once it's the size I want it to be, I can place my start point and then use my end point to rotate my design. It's pretty cool, right? Because I can rotate it completely around my start point if I want to, just by tapping where I want it or moving my long arm to where I want it to be, and then tapping on this green node that represents my end point. So that little red dot means it's my end point. The little green dot means it's my start point. And it really is as easy as moving your long arm to where you want something to be, and then tapping on what you want to be in that location. They've tried to make it really, really easy. You no longer have to try to figure out which button controls what down at the bottom. It's move your long arm and either use a stylus or your finger to tap on that node on your screen, and it's going to put it where you want it to go. So that's the basics behind this, right? And I could, once I have it placed, I'm ready to quilt, and it'll quilt that single design, and then I can place it again and quilt it again. And that's fine, right? It works extremely well. But sometimes I want to place this design multiple times. I'm going to be using this design in a quilt I'm going to do to ring around the center of the quilt. So there's going to be 8 of these placed around a motif in the center of a quilt. So I don't necessarily want to place it and then quilt it and then place it and then quilt it. It would be much easier for me to place multiple of them and then quilt multiple of them and then possibly go back and place more if I need to. It's going to depend on how much of the quilt that I can see in my safe area at any one given time. Okay, so to do what I'm talking about, you're going to tap on this button down in the bottom right that's called multi-placement. It's going to bring up a screen that says, you must now use the multi-pattern placement buttons to capture which components to place. You get to choose from marking tool, ditch, margins, and pattern. Once a component is captured, it will be highlighted blue to show it is ready to be sewn. That highlighted blue is very important. So I'm going to say OK, and you're going to see it turns my design to gray. It also gives me some extra buttons down here on the bottom right that I can use to place things. So to start out with, I'm just going to talk about patterns, and then I'm going to talk about these other 3 buttons in just a second. The first thing I need to do is place this pattern. So let's say that I want to place my pattern over here. I'm going to tap on my first button, and then I want to rotate it up in this direction. So I would tap the second place I need and rotate my design. So this is where I need that first pattern to be placed. I would then come over to the bottom where it says pattern and tap on pattern, and it is going to turn that pattern blue and ask me if I want to place this pattern again. And I'm going to say yes, I would love to place it again. So I'm going to tap on that, and I'm going to get another gray pattern. This time I'm going to put my pattern right here. I'm going to rotate it down this direction, and it may go over itself because I'm just playing right now, right? And that's okay. Okay, so if it's not in the right position, I can play with it, right? So I can say, oh, I didn't get that. It needs to be more in this position, and I'm just making it not go over itself. Pattern again. Think of this as your place buttons down here. You're telling it I'm ready to move on to the next one. And then I would keep going. I want this next pattern to start where it is. Whoops, start right here. Right? And if I come over here to the next button, I can rotate it around in the orientation I need it, and then say, I want you to place that pattern. And this time I'm going to say no. Those are the 3 patterns I want to sew right now. Once I hit quilt, you're going to see the 3 patterns that I've placed. Now, there's jump stitches on this, and there would be because the starts and stops are not connected in this case. But it would quilt them one right after another. And depending on how my settings are set, it's either going to tack off, jump, tack off, and go, or it will tack off, stop, and wait for me to tell it what to do next. To have the system pause at the end of the first design, tack off, and wait for you to tell it what to do next, you want pause at trim lines checked. If you want it to tack off, jump, tack off, and quilt without you interfacing with the computer system, you would want it unchecked. Now that we've looked at how to place and quilt multiple designs, let's look at some of the other multi-placement options. When you are looking down at the 4 buttons on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see that you can place patterns, which is what we've been doing. If your system has a ditch, you can place the ditch. If you're using a 2-point like I am right now, there is no ditch. You can place margins, which would also be if you had more information, which I'm going to show you ditch and margin in just a moment by switching to block placement. And then the last choice is marks. So what marks is your marking tool. You can now, I'm going to go to the toolbox over here on the bottom left and switch to my marking tool. I can now place marks on my screen and have Quilt Path quilt them, which means that I can do things like follow the ditch in a block and have it quilt right inside my ditch. I can go around applique. I can do all kinds of stuff with this. So I am going to go ahead and tap on my screen, which would be moving my long arm, right? And click the add button. And I'm just going to draw some lines real quick. So kind of like a big star here. We'll do a kindergarten star. Right? So if I wanted to quilt this shape and these designs, I could come over here and tap on the marks, because remember, these buttons place whatever you've done. So I have this one mark. If I hit place, it's going to ask me if I want to close the loop. No, in this case, there's no loop. So I'm going to say no. And now that's green. I can add a second mark. And then whichever one is highlighted is the one you're marking. So I could add a point and put another star right here. And then place that mark. Oops. And I know I do not want to close the loop. May have actually just placed this line right here too, and I think it did because I accidentally hit ditch instead of marked there. So I think we're going to have 3 designs and a ditch. It will do the straight line if you are doing 2-point placement as a ditch, right? Because that would be the only ditch it would have. It makes more sense when you see it in multi-point. So I'm going to show you that, or I'm sorry, in block. So I'm going to show you that in just a moment. But let's go ahead and hit quilt now because we should have multiple things in here. So you can see that it's got my designs that I created. It's got my marks in here. And it's got that ditch line, the straight line across from the start to the end point. And so if I go down and hit sew, it's going to start sewing over here. And I have it pausing at jump stitches, so it's going to stop and wait and give me the move to next button, which means I can deal with my threads. And then when I'm ready, do move to next, and it will move. And then I hit sew, and it'll tack off and go for my second design. Stop again, tell it move to next, deal with all the threads and everything, and then hit sew. And the next one it should do is the star. And now it's going to jump up to the star on the top right. And then if I hit move to next again, it's going to do our line. And then I can hit move to next again. And it's going to do the last star. So you can tell you can do multiple things when you're placing this. And it's a lot of fun. So I strongly encourage you to play with this one. It makes things really quick for you so that you can sew multiple designs at one point. You can use the marking tool to create your own designs, to trace something that's on the surface of your quilt and quilt it out again if you want to. It's another way that you can get something off of your quilt into the program and sew it. So yes, definitely play with it. Now I'm going to go ahead and clear all of this out. So I'm going to hit the clear all button down here at the bottom right. So that's what this X with the all on it is. And it's going to take all of the placements away. To get rid of the marks, I do need to remove all the points. To remove my marks, I need to hit the remove all, which will remove all of them from number 2. To remove both number 1 and number 2, you remove all underneath the markings and it will take care of everything. And then I'm going to go back under the toolbox, go back to placement for a second. I'm going to go to block in just a minute, but before I do that, I want to talk about this next button that appeared when I did multi-point. See that appeared when I did multi-placement. If I take the check off, that next is going to go away. If I put it back on, the next will come back. That is a new feature that lets you set point-to-point designs. So if I go into select pattern and choose, I'm just going to choose 13 real quick, which is kind of an arc, right? It's going to tell me it's outside the safe area to start out with, and that's fine. I'm going to click OK. So I clicked OK, and now I have my entire design here. And I'm going to change my setting down here to fit. So this next button will work with either fit or stretch. When you are using fit, it will resize your design based on the 2 points that you give it. This is going to be the point-to-point feature, and it's going to allow me to do things like put 4 of these in a square. So this would be how we do grid work. So I'm going to come over here and set my first point. And so my first point is set, and I'm going to come over and click right here and set the stop point. You're going to see it resizes the entire design, keeping the aspect ratio the same. And I have these two done. So now I can hit the next button. It's going to turn the one that I just did blue, which means it's placed it. And you're going to notice it's attached the start point of the design to where the end point was of the first design. That's the beauty of point to point. So all I would have to do is move my long arm up and then place my point again, hit the next button, move it over to the left. This is kind of hard to do with no grid, right? And then hit the next button again. And if I go down here one more time, I'm going to get a square. Oops, I didn't do that right, right? So I am going to remove last. It's okay. And I could just stretch this back in. So I'm going to click right here and say start point, click here and say end point. So if you mess up, it's okay. You can always fix it, okay? And you can tell that I wasn't, I didn't do very well at getting my square square. But if you were following something on your quilt, it would work extremely well. And like I said, you can use fit, which will resize your design, or you can use stretch, which keeps the height of your design, whatever you set it, and will stretch the length or the width of your design. So those are the two ways that you can use point to point. And I'm going to do an entire video just on point to point where you can watch me using it on a long arm. It is really, really slick. Okay, let's go ahead and clear this real quick. So I'm just going to clear all over here and say yes. It's going to make everything go away. And then I'm going to switch to block for just a second so that we can talk about the margin over here on the multi-placement, which is the last button that we need to talk about. So I am going to tap right here and then place my block, tap in the bottom right, and then place the stop point. So now I have my design placed. I can tell Quilt Path I want a frame to happen inside this box. So if I tap on either the height or the width plate and then come up and tap on the 1/2 inch, it will put a 1/2 inch echo of my ditch around my block. Okay, so if I tell Quilt Path, I want you to place my ditch, I want you to place my margin, and I want you to place my pattern, it will then say, would you like to place this again? I'm going to go ahead and say no, and then go to quilt. And what you're going to notice is I have all three of them placed, but I've only had to place that area once. Right? So it's going to automatically do everything else for me. There are going to be jump stitches in this design and that's fine. I could probably remove the one jump stitch that's going down the right-hand side of the margin line. It would stitch over it twice. But to be honest, I'm going to have a jump stitch anyway. So I don't know if I would do that or not. And I'm talking about this one right here, right? I could come and optimize and say, let's just take that one out. Right, and just have one jump stitch. It would just stitch over that left line twice, which I would do if I was really doing this. If I was custom quilting and using rulers, that's how I would do it, right? I would eliminate any jump stitches that I could, but it's going to, if I say okay, it's just going to sew it out. It'll do your ditch, and then it's going to jump. So I'm going to get my message, and I would hit next. And then hit sew, and it would do the ditch and the design, or the margin and the design, right? So pretty slick. Lots of really cool features. Multi-placement is a game changer for us guys. It means you can do a whole bunch of work at one time. I tend to do like 2 or 3 blocks and get them done and sew them. Anything that's in front of me, and then I move down the quilt and do 2 or 3 more. I feel like I need a lot of control when I quilt. So I don't personally like setting, 15 blocks across a quilt. and then, you know, having it just jump from one block to another. I want everything to hit the edges of my blocks, and there's something called fabric draw that will come into play because your quilt actually gets smaller as you quilt it. So I like the control of being able to do a group of blocks that are right in front of me at one time and then move on to the next group of blocks. Okay, but I look forward to seeing how you guys are using this too, because we're all going to use it a little bit different. I hope you've liked the video. I'm going to be shooting another video in the next day or so that is going to show you me using multi-block on my long arm. And that will be part 2 of the video that I released yesterday. So look for the next. I decided to interrupt my 2-part series to do an in-depth, training session on just what multi-point did. So tomorrow you're going to see me actually using multi-placement on my long arm. If you like the videos that I'm doing on Quilt Path, please consider subscribing and liking to my videos.